Welcome, everyone, and thank you very much for your patience there. I'm going to introduce the panel that we have with us. So we're waiting for Loretta to join us, and hopefully she'll do that soon. Loretta Joseph, among many things, is a fintech advisor. She is a public policy influencer and globally recognized as an authority in digital asset regulation and blockchain technology. We have with us also Radhika Iyengar. She's a TEDx speaker, Silicon Valley Women of Influence, and co-author of Enterprise Blockchain Has Arrived. It's an Amazon #1 new release. And we've got Nisa Amoils. She's a managing partner at A100X, a former securities attorney, and has a passion for investing in new technologies and the legal and regulatory risk management background to make the right investments. She's been a venture capitalist and family office investor for over a decade. I will be asking each of our panelists to introduce them more fully and share how they got into the blockchain space. But first, I'll let you know who I am. I'm the moderator. I'm Bridget Greenwood, and I founded The Bigger Pie. When I came into the blockchain crypto world in 2017, I saw this as another sector where we were going to see a massive transference of wealth. And I didn't want to see half the population left out again, purely because of our gender. So with The Bigger Pie, what we're looking to do is about supporting the women who are already pioneering in this space, making sure that we have our role models, that they're visible, that we're getting female founders funded, and attracting more women into the space. And to make sure that we build with a culture that's inclusive and means that the women aren't leaving after 10 years, as we're seeing in other tech sectors. Now, I know all of this, the people on our panel today are committed to building a more healthy, equitable, diverse, and transparent future, which includes seeing more investment from women and for women. This week, we saw the Global Report on Women, Cryptocurrency and Financial Independence being published by Maria Spindler. It came out this week. The key takeaways include the total number of global cryptocurrencies users have surpassed 100 million for the first time. And depending where you are in the region, women make up 15 to 55% of the crypto users. These women are highly educated, and a fifth of them either know how to code or have comparable technical skills. And I've taken this quote from it because I think it reflects the women that we have on our panel today. As pioneers in the cryptocurrency industry, these women are bringing their own chairs to the table, so to speak. They are generally committed to changing the status quo and seek financial independence. And when it comes to the landscape of startups and investments for women, the global venture funding to female-founded companies fell significantly in 2020. They got just 2.3% of VC funding globally. That is despite the fact that female-led companies generate twice as much as male-led companies, according to the BCG Group. That businesses with female founders have higher annual valuation increases, and businesses with females in senior positions are 25% more likely to outperform on profitability than those without women. And when we look at the VC landscape, a recent All-Raise report showed that female funders are twice as likely to invest in startups with one female founder and more than 3 times more likely to invest in a female CEO. VC firms that increase the number of female partners by 10% experienced a 1.5% increase in fund returns each year, plus 9.7% more profitable exits. And yet only 4.9% of VC partners in the US are women, and only 5.6% of VC firms are led. We need to be able to normalize the idea of women running successful businesses and receiving funding from VCs and angel investors, and those angel investors and VCs also being women. So I would love you to each introduce yourself. Nisa.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. As you pointed out, I started out as a securities and corporate lawyer. I then spent several years at what is now IAC, investing in the internet, and I've been in venture for over a decade. I write for Forbes Crypto. I also wrote a book in 2019 called WTF is Happening, Women Tech Founders on the Rise, where I profiled a dozen women, female founders in blockchain and made the business case for investing in women, including all the data you just put in there. I think the number has dropped in the pandemic, because when I wrote the book in 2019, it was 2.3%. And I think we've gone backwards. I think from what I've heard, about 40 years backwards. So I definitely, I got into the space, I guess about 5 years ago, when I was at a fund that was just investing in technology. And I started investing myself in the space outside of the fund. And then it sort of took over full time, as there were so many different sectors to keep up with.
Wonderful. And Radhika, would you like to introduce yourself more fully as well, please?
Sure. I'm Radhika Iyengar. I'm founding partner at Star Chain Ventures, a venture studio here based in Silicon Valley. I've been a serial entrepreneur. I've been in and around emerging technology for most of my life. Started out in semiconductors and in telecom and networking. And, you know, through all of my journey, it's always been about emerging technologies and about startups. And so I've been part of that scene for quite a long time. And about 4 years ago, roughly, I would say, is when the whole crypto and blockchain space sort of caught my eye. But what really caught my eye was the foundational aspect of what I was seeing in the technology itself. And it really reminded me of the old days of the internet, and in terms of the arc of technology, how things were starting, and a lot of the similar characteristics as well in terms of the hype cycle, and then coming out of that into a quote deep winter, and then getting out of that and seeing adoption. And what really struck me was the similarities of how enterprise was really going to be leading the way. And so I did, in fact, publish a book. I co-authored that with my colleague. Backwards, but Enterprise Blockchain Has Arrived, as you mentioned. And the book is really centered around a thesis of how this adoption of technology is going to occur, and how enterprise is going to lead the way in terms of actual deployment, scalable, enterprise-grade kind of deployments. And so there are key sectors, obviously, that capture my eye. And one of the things that, as I was writing the book and deeply involved in all of these sectors, I got the opportunity to participate and to contribute my expertise as a member of the blockchain working group here in California, advising Governor Newsom and California State Legislature, looking at the implications and the applications of this technology. So, and like Nisa, very much, focused on how do we get more women into this space? We don't want to be left behind, and already we're seeing that we're getting left behind, even in this new brilliant new technology. And that's something that we just can't afford to see happen. So a lot of effort now expended in terms of being a part of a greater purpose of not just the fund itself, but then launching into how do we support diverse founders? How do we create the opportunities for diverse founders and women founders to come into this space and be a part of this technology revolution?
Absolutely. So can you share your journey to becoming, because you both invest in these technologies, right? So can you share, Nisa, what was your route in? If someone is looking at this and saying, okay, I understand that we need more female investors, that might be something that I could look into. Can we sort of touch on what that might look like from each of you?
Sure. Well, there are these pesky little things called accredited investor laws that still exist, especially in the U.S. And it's like it excludes a lot of people still from investing, and it excludes a lot of women because they may not meet the wealth hurdles that are set forth there. With the rise of Reg CF and crowdfunding, that has helped a bit, but only up to a $5 million raise now. They've just raised it. So I think that if you are accredited, just taking the plunge and trying to invest in women is a great opportunity. I know it's something that we're very passionate about at A100X, the fund I started, where we lower the minimum for women and minorities to be able to invest, just so that they can learn about blockchain, learn about the technology, participate, learn the ins and outs so that they feel comfortable, so that we're in essence breeding more investors, which hopefully will trickle down to funding more founders, excuse me. So I think that, that part of the reason the 2% number really never moves, the investors that do exist, that like us on the panel, there are systemic barriers to raising large funds. And, there are, until those barriers are removed and until the entities that fund venture capitalists change, that number really isn't going to move very much, because the ones that do exist are small in comparison to the amount of capital that's out there.
So, yeah, I'll add to that. And I think that while the separation sort of exists between accredited and non-accredited, I do agree with Lisa that there are platforms, equity crowdfunding platforms, which are different from the regular crowdfunding platforms. Regular crowdfunding platforms are like the Indiegogos and Kickstarters of the world, and it's more like making a donation. What we're talking about is equity crowdfunding platforms like WeFunder, for example. And there are some pretty brilliant projects, and they don't have that bar in terms of, there's a maximum ceiling that you can contribute as a non-accredited investor, but it's a great place to start because it allows you to go through the process of evaluating these different projects, of looking at their materials. And a lot of the materials that are on the WeFunder campaign pages, for example, really walk you through the why of these projects to begin with, right? And so really gives you a window into how the process works, if you will, what kinds of criteria you might be interested in looking at in terms of the team, the product, the market, all of those elements that are so important as you get into investing. Those are the minimum metrics that you can get acquainted with. So that's a great way for you to get an entree, I think, into the space. Beyond that, I think there are a lot of angel groups that are out there. And there are some angel groups like Golden Seeds, for example, really all about women, by women, for women, if you will. And so those kinds of angel groups are kind of great ways for you to not only get exposed to other angels on the platform and network amongst other angels and learn from peers, but also allows you a way to look at deal flow that might not always be visible to you or you don't have access to. So I think angel groups do serve a tremendous purpose for women wanting to get into investing. And there is that trust factor with the platform that they built, right? And so it's access to deal flow, it's access to, if you're looking exclusively at women-founded companies, those are great groups to be aligned with and be a part of, because they will really filter for that. And there's so many angel groups that are coming up now, or funds that are coming up that are women-led and are trying to promote women founders as well. So I think the opportunities do exist. I think it's getting acquainted in terms of who's out there in the space. Starting a fund altogether, I think I agree with Lisa that there are barriers that still exist. I think emerging fund managers always encounter that catch-22. Well, have you done this before? And if so, what your success rates have been, et cetera, et cetera. And that affects how you raise capital and so on, even as an LP. Even as a general partner. So I think that, the whole process that needs to be opened up is education, I think, for women that want to get into investing, understanding where the avenues are, where they can start slow and small, get acquainted, get their foot in the water, if you will, and then start expanding out into angel groups and other, more formal mechanisms that they can be a part of. And I think that really can open up the opportunities for not only women investors, but also for women to get funded. And it's sort of the two sides have to come together. The more we see women who look like us that are on that investor side of the table, the more that, women founders can feel like there is a relational point, right? Because very often, and I've been a serial entrepreneur, so I know what it feels like to be on the entrepreneur side of the fence, looking at an investor who is a white male, who might not understand my particular point of view, the way I'm articulating my value proposition, and they might just write me off entirely. So I think there's a lot of bias that does exist, but that doesn't mean that it should prevent you from getting past those and breaking through barriers.
And that's really interesting. And for a lot of startups, the first round that they raise is going to be from family and friends. So is that an opportunity for women who aren't, accredited investors to be able to have a first footing into doing an investment? And then with regards to that, going into investment, I think it's important that you understand what's important to you and what you're looking for. So would you mind walking us through the investment thesis that you each have and how that helps you to be able to identify who you want to invest in, what problems they're trying to solve? Is the team important? Is the technology important? What are the factors that you consider that help you to be able to make those decisions? Nisa, do you mind answering first?
Sure. I just, on the last point though, I just wanted to clarify that, angel groups are very different from funds. The kind of companies that an angel see are not what a fund will see. And in this hyper-competitive sector is going to be hard. I don't know many founders that have gone to Golden Seeds, for instance. But to answer your question, so our thesis is that we invest in blockchain and AI-enabled businesses that show some form of social impact. And that is across sectors. It's not only in financial services, it's also in healthcare, climate, supply chains, legal title, identity, and democratization of access to capital. And we focus on the early stage. So at that stage, it's very important, obviously the team and the timing. We do extensively vet the tech. We have 2 tech experts on our team and who have built blockchains themselves. So I say that we focus on founders that we have failed before. That's often important, and have learned the lessons in those failures. And we also are hedge against the crypto market cycles. So we focus more on equity. We are not token traders. We don't believe in the model of charging fees for token trading when you can do it elsewhere. So we're not interested necessarily in certain, hyped projects that might have a token just for the sake of having a token. So we're really looking for long-term builds and, of course, mission-aligned, purpose-driven founders.
For the sake of my clarity, because you broke up a little bit, did you say that you were looking for founders who have been there and done it before?
Sometimes, yes. We've definitely backed first-time founders, but it's often very helpful if the founders have failed in the past at something else.
And is that something that a lot of the female founders who seem to be first-time female founders, it seems to be that men have more opportunities to go in, to take the risk, to fail, and then to come back again and to get that experience. Whereas women don't seem to be able to have, and I don't think it's an appetite for risk. I just think the responsibilities that lie on women, if you look statistically, generally women are doing more work, but it's unpaid work. They have more responsibilities in terms of the care sector. So being able to have the luxury to go out and to fail and then to try again isn't always easy.
It might be that they failed at a project in their job. It doesn't have to be that they've started a company before.
Right. Okay. So it's just experience, so that you've got resilience, so that you've come across a problem and you get up and carry on again.
Correct.
Thank you. And Radhika, what about your thesis? How do you decide on which projects and which startups you invest in?
Sure. So to be clear, our venture studio model is really where we're spinning up companies and will be also investing in other kinds of companies in the near future. But the focus is on the companies we're spinning up because we see some really great blue ocean opportunities that haven't been capitalized on. But in a general thesis sort of perspective, we're in a stage by stage process. Where we were when I published my book in 2019 was really about the internet of trust. And it was really redefining what online trust actually meant. And I think that the reason why we have blockchain is in part to answer that. Obviously, I won't go into the technicalities of it. There's also the Internet of Value, which is what we're seeing as well. And so I think in the next phase, which is where I'm seeing the most exciting opportunities, is in the Internet of Identity. Identity really sits as a foundational infrastructure level kind of must-have element that supersedes, basically is underlying everything else, and it supersedes in terms of priority. If you look at everything that we're doing today, and we talk about technology as being a way to make our lives better and easier in some way. So, when I look at something, first of all, I absolutely, for me, the most important thing is team, because it's really people that can create that success. And I look for particular traits in founders. Are they the type of people, not only that are they resilient, but are continually thinking about how to get to that next level. They are constantly learning and relearning and pivoting, and that flexible mindset, as much as resilience, I think is really, really important. These are ingredients to success. And so I have a good friend of mine who's a VC who often say that products can fail sometimes, but it's really people that more often fail than products. And so I think the people element, the team, has to be A+ caliber. And it's not just about the CEO and founder, it's about the entire C-suite, the entire core team that primes this thing for success. The other thing is, looking at technology itself. At one point, we are going to get to this where blockchain is not necessarily even talked about. It's about how you do something, how something gets done in a way that previously was not possible. So if you look at, and there can be drivers in the market. Look at in healthcare, and I agree with the focus, on healthcare. I'm focused on fintech, healthcare, and sustainability in large part. But if you look at what happened in healthcare, COVID was a major game changer. Where we had telehealth, which had been sitting around for nearly a decade on the sidelines, all of a sudden said, oh, wow, we're going to find a way to have regulatory compliance made easier. We're going to find a way to make reimbursements easier. We're going to find a way to qualify doctors across state lines. And all of these were put as systemic barriers against the viability of technology such as telehealth. All of a sudden that vanished. Why? Because there was a central driver out there in the marketplace that said, we have to have this. We can't do it any other way. So I think that we're going to get to a point, even with blockchain, we don't talk about blockchain anymore. Who talks about the internet anymore, right? We don't talk about API calls. We don't talk about any of the back end stuff that we do all the time. And it's part of internet technology. So I think with technology, any technology, and it's in part why I wrote the book, is because we need to raise that level of awareness and saying, what is the application of this technology? What is the power, the transformative power that a technology has? So I look for that innovation, that transformative power. How can we do things in a way that we can't ever have done before, right? To me, those are the game-changing kind of questions that I'm asking from a product standpoint. But first and foremost, I'll say it's about the team.
And when you say it's about the team, do you also have a prerequisite that there's diversity in the C-suite?
Absolutely. I think one of the prime directives that I think we as emerging fund managers, as women that are investing, have a power to say this is part of equivalent of the bottom line, right? I want to see diversity and inclusion at the core of your business. It has to be a core pillar. And if diversity and inclusion is not a core pillar, it can be made a core pillar. So again, is the core team coachable to say, you know what, I really like what you're doing, but I don't see any diversity and inclusion. Can you go fix that? Because if you fix that, maybe I'll actually be interested even more, right? Otherwise, I might look at something else and say, this is a really core, a diverse team. So I think when we can prescribe to some extent that, diversity and inclusion is not a nice to have, that it is a must have, I think we can actually hold portfolio companies accountable for what they provide. And I think that diversity and inclusion has to be there to enable this broader range of success that we know is possible with more diverse teams.
Amazing, yes. Anisa, feel free to add anything that you wish to on that. I also would be very interested, you focus on a lot of women founders in your book, is that correct? Could you tell us more about some of those founders? and the projects that they're leading?
Yes, sure. I would be happy to. Elizabeth Rosiello with Bitpesa, since changed the name of the company. Dawn Sung at Oasis Labs. We have Christina Dolan, who's founded multiple companies. There are really exceptional women in the book, and I interview all of them. I write for Forbes, so I started to interview women on Forbes, and I would get a lot of hate mail from men saying, this is probably your portfolio, that's why you're writing about them, and which was not true. But I decided that the best way was to put them all in a book and put all the stories together so that would, cease to happen. And I really wanted to include the data that I mentioned. It was 2019, so it's been updated since, but basically it's the same data, right? Like undershopped, undervalued, over-deliver. Not only for the founders, but also the investors over-deliver if they're diverse too. So that was really what I wanted to get the attention to, is that I don't want to end up in the same place where traditional finance and traditional tech are, where we have to go back and try and fix it with a Band-Aid. This is really technology that's what, the Satoshi white paper was written 11 years ago. And there's just no excuse for why, there's so many just all male panels still in this industry, all male podcasts, et cetera. There are so many women doing so many great things, and they should get the attention as well.
Absolutely agree. I only recently discovered that Cynthia, can't remember her surname, Cynthia Dwork, she was responsible for proof of work. She and her partner at the time in terms of research was, I think it was Moni Noor, something like that. And between the two of them, they were saying, how can we stop spam email? So you send out one email and a little bit of work and that's okay. But, you start to send out 100,000 emails and your computer has to do some work that begins to add up. So this idea of proof of work, the amount of times that, in cryptography, the women were pioneering in the space. In coding, women were pioneering in the space. And then men realized actually this wasn't women's work. This was the serious work, and sort of sidelined. And that there are so many stories of that happening in history. But proof of work concept was in the 90s. So I think we really need to be making sure that the work that the women do is visible and recognized, and we do have the role models that
so
are.
History is really his story, if you think. And there are been a million times that women have been written out of history. And so we have the capability, or at least I have that platform, to make sure that doesn't happen again. And that's what we can do for next generations to come.
I will jump on that and completely agree with you, Nisa. It's not a question of looking at what's out there. It's looking beyond what's out there, because how many times do we have to be reminded that there are hidden figures everywhere? And those hidden figures are incredible, pioneering, trailblazing women who've been written out of history because it's his story, like what Nisa said. Completely agreed with that. I think that, this is where we have the power of our voices. Voices in this conference, in this panel, for example. We're all trying to make that difference. And by, supporting one another, by linking arms, by not trying to reinvent the wheel. It doesn't have to be that you have to launch some special women do, but you find other women's groups that are out there with other leading women out there that are also trying to make a difference. And it's about amplifying the voice. This is why I love the title of this summit, because it is about amplifying her voice. Her voice is incredibly important. It's actually, if you look at global populations, we're above the 0.5%, right? We're about 51% of the population. It's about time that our voice is also 51%. It has historically not been the case, and we continue to be, hidden away, shuffled away, ignored, dismissed, our work often stolen, taken. There's lots and lots and lots of examples that we can point to that continually happen. I can't imagine. There's so many people that I'm in touch with. They say, wow, I studied fill in the blank as a field in college. Never even knew. Never heard of this woman, and she was like the pioneer in this space. That story I hear more often than ever before. So I think we as a collective female, we have the power to change that, to put the spotlight on incredible women that are doing incredible things. And I think that just as Nisa, you kind of aggregated a set of female founders and voices and practitioners in your book, same thing in my book. We try to highlight great women leaders who are paving the way. And so I think the more we can write about it, speak about it, support each other's voices and amplify each other's voices on it, the more that we can create this web of awareness and change that notion that we don't seem to have the ability or the what it takes. And that's just wrong, right? We know that we absolutely have the ability to do what it takes. Not only that, but I think if Loretta was on this panel, she'd say we do it better than everyone else. By the way, because we've been in all male sort of situation. We go, I know more than them. I can do more than them, right? But it's about being visible, and I think that this is why we have these great conferences and summits, because we can put the spotlight on great women leaders, on great women voices. We all have a voice that deserves that center stage platform. And this is about amplifying each other's capabilities. And so, for blockchain anyway, I think we are still in nascent days. I see this as a foundational technology, just like the internet took quite a long time. We've been at the internet for quite a while now. Blockchain is going to have this incredibly long life. And so it's important in this early stage that we excite and inspire and persuade other incredibly capable women to join forces and to look at this foundational technology, saying this is going to have an impact in almost every sector you can think about. There is going to be an arc to this adoption. There are use cases that you will turn to first because they don't necessarily have as many of the complex things like identity involved. But identity is really that big frontier space. And I feel like if we can get more women involved in that space right from the ground zero or -1 even, that we have a better chance of ending up with more women on the other side. And we don't have to keep having these conversations about how can we get more women.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And one of the things that I think is really fascinating is women seem to care more about stakeholders and less about shareholders. So and there's research shows that women care more about their community around them. So it's not just about what profits can we take and what can we extract. It's more about what values can we deliver, what solutions are out there. So I know that you're both interested in sustainabilities and projects that do that. Do you want to speak a little bit more towards that side of the focus on solving problems and the importance in that?
Can I just quickly jump in on that? I mean, Bridget, you really hit a nerve, a chord there, because I think if I look at blockchain as a technology, indeed, the ethos of blockchain is about community. It's about shared community. And I feel like, when we have a community-driven technology, this is where women can shine. Internet technology was largely about that zero-sum mentality. I can only win if you lose. It's very binary. I feel that with blockchain, it is entirely about the community. If you look at the open source code, if you look at the community building kind of, element that goes into actual development of blockchain projects, this is where women shine. We're naturals at this. We are social creatures. We enjoy it. We feed off of each other. And it's a shared commitment. And so I feel like this is where stakeholder mentality absolutely is at the heart of blockchain. If you look at why blockchain is different, first of all, if you look at consensus, what that means is to arrive at consensus in blockchain. If you look at governance being a central driving, heart of blockchain, if you will, that's all something that I think that we women excel at. And I think that this is the opportunity for women to identify it resonates with our natural skill sets and talents. So I think that this is where I'm hoping women can really embrace the technology and take this to the next level.
Loretta, it's great to have you with us. Nisa was just about to share some insights, so can I let her do that, and then we'll come to you and get you to introduce
I'm
yourself.
glad I'm
again.
here. Sorry, it's 6 o'clock in the morning in my part of the world.
Nisa, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that you're right, that women don't focus enough about shareholder and wealth creation opportunities. And it's great to have community goals and solving the goals, but often you can't get there on your salaries, right? And we talked about this, Bridget, is that the mindset is, it's fine to give to charity and get a tax deduction for that, but you don't realize you can invest. You can earn at least 5 times, hopefully, on what you invested back, and then you can have so much more impact. So unfortunately, we live in a society where we do need capital to make the impact that we all want to see in the world. And I think that's really a very important distinction, especially for women, because a lot of women don't think that way. And the more we can convert them into thinking that way, the better off we will all be.
Can I just quickly just say that, to me, being community driven is not at the expense of, a profit motive. So I think it's people and profits, but it's also planet. And so there are many pillars with your impact focus. I'm sure you'll agree, Nisa, that it is, the community ethos of blockchain doesn't mean that you're sacrificing profit. And I want to make that an absolute clarity. This is not like a charity project. This is not about making a donation. This is about creating a project that is going to be hugely successful and lucrative. But you can make it so that being profit driven doesn't mean you're sacrificing an impact and making the world a better place. So I think solving big problems is where we're at. We're running out of time on multiple levels in terms of climate, in terms of the health crises, on many, many fronts. And so we do need that impact-driven, community-driven spirit, but not at the sacrifice of profits. I think it's a you can create that win-win-win, but that's not the paradigm.
Right.
Yeah, and I think
and that's what we believe.
Yeah, I think there are 2 points there that you're both shared very well. Is that one is, yes, we don't have to do impact instead of profits, and 2 is that when women are thinking about community and when they are thinking about being impactful, it doesn't necessarily have to be on charity basis. It can be the more finance we have, the more dollars that we have, that we can then redirect into this work, the more impactful that we could be. Loretta, good morning to you. Thank you so much for getting up. It's such
I'm sitting in hotel quarantine, so it's good.
Oh, bless you. Loretta, I did a brief introduction for you, but as I asked with Nisa and Radhika, would you mind giving us a fuller introduction of who you are, what you do, and how you got into this space?
So I'm a banker by trade. I'm an economist. I spent 32 years of my life trading derivatives. So I've traded every asset class. I ran a couple of global banks. I decided to retire in 2012 at 43. That didn't work out very well for me. So I started to investigate blockchain. I've done a lot of tech investing, actually, because I lived in India for 10 years. So I sit on the board of a number of venture capital firms. Tech's always really interested me. Then I started to look at blockchain in 2014, and I went down that rabbit hole. So I spent the last 7 years of my life explaining blockchain technology to governments and policy writers and bringing industry in. So I write laws and regulations around blockchain and crypto assets. I'm not a lawyer, though. And I have a lot of companies that I've invested in, a lot of companies I advise. I got Bitcoin when it was $40, so I'm a pretty happy lady. And so I look at now helping people to understand regulations and to have the right regulations in place, because none of us work if you're going to get arrested. If you have a business, you're not going to work in Nigeria. I work mainly in the emerging world, India, Africa. I live between Mauritius and Australia. So I invest in a lot of blockchain projects. I'm an advisor on many. My thesis is, I'm a banker. You've got to make money at the end of the day, and most of these companies, I've invested in a lot that don't make money, but I also had some big winners. And I think, for me, it's when I was, Radhika and I did a lot of work together. I try and educate the millennial male that having an all-male board is not good for him in the long run. And the diversity of what we do in blockchain just doesn't exist at the moment. There's very few women in it that actually make money, and there's a lot in it that actually don't do too much. So I try and bridge that wall, I guess, between old finance and new finance. I work for a lot of governments. I build now digital exchanges, asset-backed assets. I work with most central banks around the world and probably most law enforcement. So, I do a lot of work in Nigeria, where that's probably got the most penetration of crypto. I think they've got 75 million crypto holders. I work with the biggest exchanges in the world, like Binance, Luno, Kraken, and I do a lot of work around law enforcement to make sure that everything on the blockchain is not done for AML, not breaking AML CTF regulations that the FATF put in. So I have two sides to me. I'm a regulator and an investor, and a mum in between.
Yes, we haven't touched on the mum aspect, even though this is Mother's Day Summit. What has being a mum brought to you in terms of how you wish to build in your business and what you look to create? Has it had an impact on how you view things?
Yeah, so I took my little girl when she was 6 months old to India on my own, because I'm a single mum, to live. Sophie, my daughter, realises that everybody's not born the same. There's an incredible, there's the haves and there's definitely the have-nots. Her and I, when I got into blockchain in 2014, I'm a banker, I'm a trader. I knew nothing about coding, so she taught me. So my little girl codes across maybe 8 protocols. She has a lot of crypto kitties. She has a lot of Bitcoin. I think at 17 she's doing much better than I ever did. But I look at her and the way that she interacts with technology and the way that she learns everything she has on this device. So I actually use her as a reference point. When I'm talking to regulators and governments, I say, have a talk to my daughter. And it's a very levelling thing, because I ask her more than I ask people that write policy what she thinks of things that mummy's doing, because she has a much better grasp of risk and she has a much better grasp of technology, and she knows so much more at 17 than I knew at 40, because I didn't grow up with a mobile device. And I think I always say to the policymakers and a lot of the investors my age, we are not writing policies and you're not investing in companies for people my age. We're the baby boomers. We have to look at these millennial kids and the ones under Sophie's generation, because they have a different ethos about what they will look at, what they'll invest in. And Sophie invests in things now, like she crowdfunds stuff. So I think, it's the age gap has really narrowed. And I think she's also taught me that we have to stand up for our girls, because there are so few girls in the world that thinks that things like STEMs and tech are really cool, and it's very male dominated. But we need them. We need the young girls, because if you've got a whole bunch of millennial coders that are 25, 26, they're not writing protocols and rules for networks that are particularly diverse or good. So I hope that that she's helped me and I've helped her, and I think she's learned from me not to fear no man, and I think that's a really good thing as a 17-year-old. I wish I had have told myself at 17 that everybody will tell you no, but usually when they tell you no, it means you can do it. So go and do it.
Really good. Do either of you want to answer the question in terms of your parenting?
Sure, I'll just jump in, but it's a slightly different thing. I have 2 young men I've raised, and they're in their 20s, and I'm basically proud of the fact that I've raised really empathetic, compassionate, and open-minded young men. My older son, for example, is working at a startup in San Francisco, and he was recently asked to help find new candidates for roles that they were hiring, and reached out to me and he said, I want to get tapped into really great women coders. We need that we need to expand the diversity in our development team. So I thought, well, I've done something right, because I think that it's important for young men and women to be aligned as we go forward. This is not a gender issue. This is not a race issue. This is a human issue. So I think that for me, that's what I've learned through my journey in motherhood is really understanding that we're all on the same page. We're all on the same side of the fence. This is a human side of the fence. And the types of issues that we are trying to solve in a hurry, by the way, in the next few years and the next decade are huge, huge challenges for the entire planet. And we better start thinking as a complete human race. And it's not about men versus women versus whatever. This is about us all as humans on a human side of the equation. So this is what I hope, and that I'm overjoyed to see with my young men, and how they've developed themselves, and how they're still growing through things, and are really being very aware of what's happening in the world.
Nisa, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think it's all been said already, but I have one of each. So
well done. I have one boy, so I'm trying to do the same as Radhika, and it's very interesting seeing him grow up and accepting all sorts of being aware of all sorts of different fluidities and gender, and just everyone is everyone. I always think about the thought experiment. If the world had a threat from an alien species, we would all band together and go, here's a common enemy. We can put our differences aside and we can work together. If we just remove that threat, can we please carry on and say, how do we work together? That would be quite amazing. Loretta, we did discuss about what it's like to become a female investor, how important it is to change the landscape and have more female investors so that we can invest into more female founders. And Patricia asked a question that I didn't get a chance to ask the panel, so it'd be great if you would give us your thoughts on this first. Patricia's asked, is it realistic to expect VCs to change? And what do you think of the alternatives to VCs that will work for women?
VC is going to change not in 1,000 years. It's my first answer. That's why I stopped working with VCs, because they have the inherent thing I don't like about VCs is that they take equity. And at the end of the day, they take equity and everything comes at a price. Nothing's ever free. No venture capitalist is ever going to give you advice for free. And then you as a founder of a company wake up 5 years later and you don't even own that company. So I have an inherent issue about venture capitalists. That's why I like blockchain. So I think I've written the first laws in the world around ICOs, so initial coin offerings, and DeFi, because I think these things are making it much more level playing field and much more democratized about how we can all invest. It's not about me. I was a banker for 30 years, and that's what I had to do every day to make money. And a lot of it, but that doesn't make you any happier. So I think that the way that investing, and if you look at Reddit, what happened, and I think that's what blockchain's done, and Bitcoin started to do that. So it's the internet democratized media, then Bitcoin's democratized money, and now I think we're getting to a new level with things like DeFi, and that we're starting to see democratization investing. So that's the playing field I want, is that every person on the world should be able to have a fraction of investment in something they want. And that's really important to me. But so I like the model that the ICO's created. Obviously, there was a bit of problems around people scamming stuff, but I've written regulations. If people do that, they go to jail and they get charged a shitload of money if they break securities law. So that's why I sit on the regulated fence as well. But I think, I think with these projects that you're seeing, people have to do their own research. And when I always say to people, it's not, it's not rocket science, but you need to understand what you're investing in. So I like the model that we're now seeing with democratized investing through the crowd funds effectively. And I've never been a fan of venture capitalists, because I do really believe that they're out for one thing, and that's to make 5, 10x. Yeah, and you can still do that, but it's just not. I think they're very ruthless, and I find that much more in the US than anywhere else in the world, because you have more venture capitalists. I don't deal with US venture capitalists, and even if I'm helping a company, I basically tell them not to take money from the US. Radhika might hate me on saying that, but I find the Indians and the Asian and the European ventures to be a little bit nicer. But there's a model that Silicon Valley follows, there's a model that New York follows, and the rest of the world is a little bit different. So I don't work, as I said, with US venture firms, but I'm finding so many projects across Africa and India that are so interesting. But as soon as I go into invest in a company, I tell them they have to have at least one woman on the board. I won't look at them unless there's one woman on their board. And some of them are quite horrified by that, but it's like, well, that's what I do. And if you don't have one, at least one, but I prefer you to have two, I won't even look at you. But I invest on the people, not the company. If I like the people, I'll give them money. I don't really even need to look at their business plan. So I don't follow the traditional venture capital investment model because I don't follow too many models, to be honest. I'm a bit of a black horse on most things.
So when you say that they need to have at least one woman on the board, we know that they can go out and find a capable woman. But sometimes I hear the argument of, well, just because we're hiring a woman, if they just hire a woman to tick the box, then that woman is going to be deemed to fail because they're not. It's lazy hiring. So do you find that happens, and what can we do to make sure it does?
What I do, with the companies I invest in, I work really closely with. I sort of mother them as well, and I think a lot of these young guys are building stuff. They need that because they need. It's the yin and yang, I guess, of the spiritual world. But I often help them, and it's not just ticking the boxes. I think if you're a big company in the US or Australia or the UK, that's what people do. I can't tell you how many people ring me up and say, cool, we're going to put you on our board. And I'm like, what for? We need a woman. And I go, no, I don't even know what you do. So I find that very bad. I think that's the wrong mentality. And we as women and we as investors, we have an obligation to show these companies that we're investing in that if they do it the way we say it, it's much better for them in the long run.
I'll just jump in, and say one thing is that there are ways to buck the trend. So I might be sitting here in Silicon Valley and looking at investing, and I don't necessarily agree with all of the premises, if you will, that Silicon Valley represents, because I think the view is global. So I think that for me, what's important is what's going to benefit from a world view. It's not about developing some frivolous little app that is going to have no consequence. I often make a joke about it and saying, the classic app that might get funded is some ordering cupcakes at midnight or something like this. And I'm going, well, who cares about ordering cupcakes at midnight? It's about doing something a lot more impactful. There's a purpose behind this. And so for me, it's about doing something. And so as a VC, I think the great value, if you do it right, and if you find the right VC, it's about adding value from a base of experience, from insights, from network, from being able to facilitate and accelerate and enable that growth to happen in the right way, because we know that founders will often think much more opportunistically and say, well, I'm just going to dart and throw these darts up and see which one sticks, and that's my product market fit. And you're like, no, that is not product market fit. You actually have to identify who your target customer is. You have to have the right go-to-market strategy to capture market share. So there's a process to this, and there's a very strategic process to this. And I think that the best investors, no matter where you come from, add that value, add that ability to enable their portfolio companies to succeed. So I think that, when you have a global view, I think it absolutely does change things. I was selected by the State Department, for example, to participate in President Obama's entrepreneurship summit, Global Entrepreneurship Summit in 2016. And the finalists that came from all over the world were all about impact. They were looking at changing their world and saying, we need to make this world a better place. And I'm thinking, we need to have more of that. So I'm very much on the global front. And I'm hoping to add that value. This is not about having something frivolous at the end of the day.
Yeah, I want to just echo that not all venture capitalists are created equal. And it is about adding value. In fact, as a securities lawyer, I'm involved in tons of different regulatory groups, talking to regulators all the time. And that is a very unique added value that I can give to portfolio companies about what is legal. Not only that, but it helps us with our risk management in a fund, never investing ever in something that was ever illegal. So I just want to say that we want founders to not dilute themselves. We want them to retain ownership over a certain percentage of the company. And so not all venture capitalists do what you're saying. We invest globally. We have a global view as well.
Absolutely. So for the women who are listening, either now on the panel, and I know it's going on to YouTube, so for the women who will be listening on the replays, when it comes to being able to say, okay, I'm now inspired and I want to be able to start investing myself, what's the best, what are the next steps? I mean, Nisa, do you want to be able to share how they would be able to get hold of you? Because they're saying, actually, I have $10,000. I don't have to have the $100,000. This sounds like something that I can do.
Absolutely. Nisa at a100x.com or just go to a100x.com.
And Radhika, what would your advice be?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me. I'm at Radhika at startchain.vc. You can reach out to me. I mean, I think there's lots of ways for you to get engaged. I happen to like, certain equity crowdfunding platforms because I do think that it opens up and democratizes access to investment opportunities.
Definitely. And Loretta, if you're looking to become a female investor or being an investor who happens to be female and do something to be able to use your dollars to be impactful, to be able to make a difference and get a return, what sort of advice do you have for those people?
Anyway, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm just Loretta Joseph. I think that I've been a trader for 30 years of my life. So I come from, it's never invest more than you can lose. It's my ethos, and I always tell people, it's like, it doesn't matter what asset class you're dealing with. Everything goes up and everything goes down. So, that's just the laws of physics. So do your research. Don't just jump into things because people tell you they're good. But always, if you're going to invest, whether it be $1, $10, $10,000, $100,000, do your research because from my experience, everything I'm invested in, a lot of them don't go anywhere. But you have the one or two that will, that are the unicorns that make you a lot of money, but 8 out of 10 make you nothing. But and I don't think that's bad. I think your learning as you go along is important, but don't ever overcapitalize yourself. Like, don't ever put in as much as you're really willing to lose.
And I'd like to add as well that holding my first Bitcoin, holding my first cryptocurrency, the radical responsibility that blockchain and decentralization gives you, that you don't have this phone number, this customer service that you have to do. The emotional impact of buying something, have I got this right? And then all of a sudden you're much more interested in watching the price. And you think when it's going up, wow, this is amazing, it can't possibly go down. And then when it's going down, you're like, oh my goodness, is it ever going to stop? And I think, just being able to have that ability to hold something quite small, to get into it, to be able to have that visceral feeling and that understanding would also be very useful, because actually when you're talking about what investments are doing and the price that they have, I personally was quite shocked about the emotional attachment I had to the price. And I'll do it, put it down and leave it, because you're not trading. You don't need to look at it every day.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I wrote the first custody regulation in the world for Bitcoin and digital assets because it was one thing that kept me up at night, and it was because I hold Bitcoin. And so what happens if I die? Tomorrow I have gold, I have real estate, but my Bitcoin, what was going to happen to her if I died? It took me 3 years. So I've written legislation around the holding of digital assets and crypto for that very reason, because we know if we die and you put in your will, you can get your bar of gold from the vault, or you can get your real estate. But what happens with my Bitcoin that I have with my daughter? So that's why and it's interesting. I've thought about those problems, and I sit in a lucky place being a regulator, that I can then go and figure out those problems and write them into laws and regulations, because these things are very new, and these asset classes that we're seeing are posing new opportunities for investment, but they're also very risky. So it's been for me a fine line to balance being my regulator hat on one side and my investor hat on the other side.
Absolutely.
I'll add to that, and I just want to share. First of all, the future is decentralized, no question about it. But I think that it's also compliant and private.
Yep.
So to me, the whole question of identity and privacy and compliance absolutely, crucially, foundationally important, but it is going to be a part of an exciting decentralized future.
Mm. Can I ask you to add why privacy is so important? Because I get it, but what I get very frustrated by is, I have nothing to hide. And then not understanding the importance of privacy. So before we close, could we maybe touch on that really important subject?
Can I add to that for you? So there's a difference between privacy and secrecy. When you speak to governments, regulators, law enforcement officers, when you think of privacy, they think of secrecy. Privacy and secrecy are not the same thing, but often they get put in the one bucket. Privacy is very, very important because we live in a world where our data is so toxic, and every piece of data I give to my daughter will give her information to anyone as long as she has access to the internet. So, so I think privacy to me is really important, and we're losing that because every time we go on the internet, we log into a Wi-Fi, we log into Facebook. It's somebody's selling my data, and I guess that's why Bitcoin was built, because the people that Satoshi Nakamoto really valued his privacy, but in essence, it's not private. Bitcoin's not private because it's pseudo-anonymous. But it's an interesting one. People really confuse. And when I speak to law enforcement guys in security agencies, they really think that the whole world is nefarious in this Bitcoin world because they think they're trying to be secret. And it's a level of education piece that I have to explain to them. No, it's not about being secret. It's privacy and secrecy are very different things. So you have to look at it from the lens that people are not doing things to be nefarious. 98% of anyone in cryptocurrencies is not. Less than 1% of a Bitcoin transaction in the world is being used for nefarious activity, whereas it's about 10% with cash. So there's very misaligned guidance on what is privacy and what is secrecy.
I couldn't agree more in terms of how people conflate privacy and secrecy. But for me, just fundamentally, I think privacy is really central to our personal freedom. I think that the opposite of that is what we have, where nothing is private, where everybody knows everything. And, I was sitting on this task force that I was mentioning, which is blockchain working group. We often talked about that, from a regulatory or from a legal perspective here in the United States, for example, you look at privacy laws and it's only at the federal level and it's about government infringement on privacy. What about technology infringement on privacy? So I think that it's private sector infringement on privacy, which is what we're facing. And we've kind of lost sight of that. So to me, that's foundationally important for freedom. If we are going to live in a truly democratic, free society, we have to protect our privacy. We have to have control over our own private data. And if we choose to disclose something for compliance reasons, for example, it's a selective disclosure when and with whom and for how long and what type of information. It's not an a la carte, here it is all for free, right? And so the problem with the internet is that the internet as a technology, as a foundational protocol, was a communication protocol. It was never designed for privacy and secrecy. Security. So I think we have reached the outer fringes of what that offers. And that's why there is this raison d'etre for blockchain.
And that's an interesting point, Radhika, because my biggest mentor is Robert Kahn. So Bob Kahn built the internet. He wrote the internet protocol and the transmission control protocol. He sent a message over an open network to a guy called Vincent, which said hello. So he's mentored me for the last 7 years because as a banker, I didn't have any understanding about open systems or the technology. But he has told me many times when he built the internet, it was purposely built without a security layer. And what you see when Bitcoin came along, and this, I guess, is the infrastructure part of it, Bitcoin is secure. So it added on that layer of security that the internet never had before. So what you'll see, and we won't be talking about blockchain like we talk about the internet in the next 5 years, because what you see, these protocols like Bitcoin and maybe Polkadot, they're building these new security protocol layers on top of what Bob built. Now, nobody knows that there's 48 other protocols built on top of what Bob sent to Vincent. We just use that. So that's an interesting thing too, is that we can now send information across open networks, which used to not be secure, but now because you've got these new technology with Bitcoin with blockchain, is that you can send information and you can make it secure. So I think the idea of self-sovereign ID comes from that. And we shouldn't be giving all our data out to 50,000 other companies to go and sell it on our behalf. We should be able to sell it when we want.
And for how long and for what purposes?
Yep. And to who?
Exactly. Thank you so much, Nisa, Radhika, Loretta. Thank you very much indeed for your time. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your generous insights and sharing, and to allow other people to be able to connect with you afterwards. I'm going to say good night.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Bridget.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day, night, evening, wherever you are.
I'm off to bed now.
I'm getting up.
Good night, Bridget. Have a good day, and Nisa. Good to reconnect.
Bye.
Bye-bye.